Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful and a super inspiring day, and thanks so much for joining me today for another video. If this is your first time here, welcome. I am so happy that you found my channel. My name is Erica and I am an artist and creator of all of these sketching and watercolor tutorial videos that I share here at my channel. And if you've been watching my videos for any amount of time, welcome back. I am so happy that you're here. So I have something different and special planned for you guys today. I have a Q&A in which I'm going to be answering questions that I received from people here on YouTube and also over on Instagram and Facebook and different communities that I have online, because I promised you guys that once I reached the 10,000 subscriber mark here on YouTube, that I would be filming another Q&A video. So I thought it's time to stop procrastinating on this and take the bull by the horns. So what I did is I collected a few questions via my different online platforms, and I'm gonna be doing my absolute best to get through them. You guys who have been here at my channel for any amount of time are probably already well aware that I rarely share this kind of sit down video here on YouTube. I do it for my Patreon community, but I rarely do this on my YouTube channel. So if you find this one enjoyable, if you find it helpful, do let me know in the comment section below, and I'll do my very best to make them happen more frequently here at my channel. All right, so without much further ado, let's go ahead and get started with question number 1. And this one is, I would love to know what your long-term career goals are. So it wasn't until around 4 years ago that I started sharing my work online, sharing helpful content with people, and doing what I could to build up some sort of audience online. And it wasn't until around 1.5 to 2 years into that, after consistently sharing helpful content and continuing to share my work as I continued building up my art skills, that I started creating an income stream for myself via my online efforts. Before that, I worked regular full-time jobs, very creative full-time jobs, first as a graphic designer. After graduating with a graphic design degree, I worked at an advertising agency for a few years. And after that, I worked as head art teacher in a school environment for over 7 years. I hadn't even started on social media at all. I had zero presence online before that, because I honestly thought that I would be working for someone else and would be an employee for the rest of my working life. I honestly never thought that I had what it took to start out my own business. I never considered myself the entrepreneurial type. I had no artists in the family growing up showing what it took, or kind of steering me in the direction that I had to go in order to continue developing those creative gifts that I started showing since I was a little girl. And honestly, I struggled with very low self-esteem for a very long time in my life, and I had a lot of internal work to do. It wasn't until I was about to turn 30 that I finally acknowledged the fact that I was pretty sad and that I actually wanted more for myself. And it wasn't that my jobs themselves made me depressed, though they were very high stress jobs, and I worked around 10 to 12 hour days. And I had a very small amount of time to actually work on my own artistic projects and continue developing my own art skills. But something inside me, it's, a lot of times you hear this, it's like a little voice that you hear that there's something else for you to do, to explore or whatever. And that little voice starts getting louder and louder and louder and louder until you can't ignore it anymore. And so what I decided to do was create a plan for myself. I always had to have some sort of income coming in. I had to make that income. And so I could never leave that full-time job completely and just devote my entire year or something to build up my own business, because I knew that that was going to take time. And I knew that there were going to be investments to make since the beginning: an accountant, courses that I had to take because I knew nothing about business or accounting or inventory or like managing my time as a business owner. I would have to invest in all of these things, a website. I had the patience to stay in my last job at least a couple of years so that I could save up a good amount of money to invest in those things, to start growing my business, and also to have money to sustain myself as my business grew. And by the time I left my full-time jobs, I was already starting my own business on the side. I was already teaching people of all ages from my own home studio. I was already starting to sell my artwork. And so it was a transition. I went from working regular full-time positions for many years. I started my business on the side while still working those regular full-time jobs. And then that transitioned into online. I am still participating in art events locally. I am doing commissions for people in my city and doing art sales locally. But the majority of my income is now coming from my online multiple income streams that I've built up for myself, my one-on-one classes that I teach via Skype, my membership website, my blog, a little tiny bit from YouTube. I'll talk more about that later. And yeah, those are the main ones, little ones aside from those, but those are the main ones. They've all taken a while to grow and a ton of time and effort and patience and continuing to learn. But I am super, super happy that the effort is paying off because they continue to grow. So my goals with this long term, I would say, are continuing to grow my income via my online efforts to the point that I can not only sustain myself, but also save for the future and be able to maybe even travel more because I rarely travel, and maybe buy a house or something like that. But it is all going to come from continuing to create and sell my original art, as well as from some sort of educational service that I can provide to others to help them get to a point at which they're improving their artistic skills and developing their voice. That is what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. Moving on to question number 2, and this one is, before using social media, how did you promote your art? So as I said in the previous question, I was already building up my name locally and doing everything that I am doing online right now. I did locally for a number of years before even thinking of taking it online. As an art teacher in a school environment, you get to know a lot of people because usually there's only 1 or 2 of you in the entire school community. I had over 500 students each year to teach, so imagine the amount of adults I knew and the staff and everything. And so they all knew that when I started teaching from my own home studio and when I started selling my work, I was able to share with them, and some of them shared with others, and it was a word of mouth type thing. And then I also, as I said, I started doing my best to participate in local art fairs and events and have gallery shows and stuff like that. Moving on to question number 3, and this one is, where's your accent from? So I am Mexican American. I was born in Central Texas, and I have lived in Mexico, northern Mexico, for the majority of my life. At this point, I consider myself more Mexican than American, and yeah, that's why you probably hear a little accent. All right, moving on to the next question, and this one is, what do you enjoy drawing or painting most? So I think in terms of drawing and sketching, I really enjoy sketching the human figure, sketching portraits, and also sketching objects and even urban sketching. So a whole bunch of different things. And when it comes to painting, I really enjoy food illustration and still life. This one is, how to come over my shivering hands at times when I hold a pencil or brush, though I know I need patience. Okay, so I have quite a few things to say about this one. Number 1, it could be a physiological issue that you have. And in those cases, then a doctor is probably someone who you should turn to, because if your hand is really shaking, trembling all the time, that could be due to something health related, right? And that is not really going to come down to just practicing or doing drills or anything like that. Which, by the way, if you do have a health related issue that makes your lines wobble or whatever it is, you know, I've known of artists that are able to develop a very highly unique art style that is just very distinctive to them because they have that sort of thing going on. So if you have that sort of issue or anything of the sort, don't lose patience and just know that you could get to a very good place with your art even with that going on. But aside from this, I have met a lot of beginners who think that you have to lay down a perfect line or a perfect brushstroke right off the bat, and that any sort of erasing or anything like that means you're less of an artist and that you're not doing it well enough. And this is not the case at all. Drawing, especially if you're doing it freehand, which is what I love to do, it's a constructive refinement process. And this is why initially you have to make sure that you're laying down your lines very, very lightly, which entails you developing control over your drawing tools so that you can erase as needed and continue refining whatever it is, proportions, locations, angles, whatever it is that you're drawing. And when it comes to brush strokes, what's wrong with a slight wobble? I don't understand. Sometimes it's those little wobbles, irregularities, and imperfections that provide interest and personality to a piece. So remember, it's not like when you're writing, we were trained to write down our name perfectly when we were little kids and not make mistakes and even color inside the lines and stuff like that. But that is not art, that is not drawing, that is not painting, okay? We have to really embrace irregularity and allow ourselves to get loose and allow ourselves to refine and build along the way. Now, if it's not the first issue and you've already gotten rid of that perfectionistic mindset that everything has to be perfect right off the bat, then I would totally recommend doing drills. So when it comes to drawing and sketching, really practicing different lines and shapes with the overhand grip, the underhand grip, the extended tripod, all of those, preferably on some sort of slanted or more of a vertical position as opposed to a flat horizontal one like the surface that a table or a desk offers, on something like an easel or something that allows you to really practice control over your pencil with appropriate pencil holding. And when it comes to painting with watercolor or brush strokes, I've also created videos in the past. I'm going to make sure to link to at least one of them below with a bunch of different brush strokes that you can practice, exercises that you can do to really improve your control over your brushes and also your water control. That kind of exercise is super helpful as well. Moving on to the next question, and this one is, if you could start your art career / YouTube journey over again tomorrow, but knowing everything you know now and have learned, would you do anything differently? So for me, my art career and my YouTube journey are completely different things. YouTube is just a very small piece of the pie in terms of all of the efforts that I am doing. And since the beginning, I didn't really consider it to be any sort of real, reliable, consistent income stream for myself. But I knew that putting myself out there via video would be something important to do if I wanted to grow my name online. But I also knew that it would be a great way for me to share my services and products that I would be developing in the future. Thankfully, I learned pretty early on when starting my online business through courses that I invested in and things like that, that YouTube was not really a reliable income stream, and that in and of itself, it's not really a business model. It's more so a marketing and sharing and community building aspect. So in terms of my personal growth with marketing, and also in terms of it's free and it's a way that I can share the products and services that I would be offering in the future. That's why I wanted to be on YouTube. I'm happy that I never put all of my eggs in the YouTube basket, because to the day, even 4 years into it, after sharing at least a video a week consistently, I don't believe I've missed a single week since I first started on YouTube. The amount that I earn is peanuts. It's a very small amount. I think it doesn't even cover 2 weeks of groceries a month. Okay, so YouTube for me is really a passion project. And as I said, I keep doing it because I am able to share these other things that I am working on consistently with people. I am able to continue pushing myself through developing better content and my online teaching, and also just building up a community. In terms of what I would do differently in the grand scheme of things, I think one of the things that I would have told myself to do since way before is to start building up an Instagram account, because people who were on that platform from early on, like early adopters of the platform, they were able to grow so much faster. I would have probably worked way harder on sharing blog posts and just growing my name online via social media before taking the leap of leaving my last regular full-time job. That is definitely something that I kind of regret not having started before. Okay, moving on to the next, and this one is, do you ever do any outdoor painting or drawing? If so, do you have any particular tips? So before the pandemic, I did take my sketchbooks and my drawing pens, not as much my watercolors, but I do enjoy doing sketching in coffee shops. I also really enjoy taking my sketchbook and my drawing pens when I go off on trips to do some sketching, sometimes in parks. But mostly I work in my studio. And I have 2 tips that I can think of right off the top of my head. The first one is to make sure that you devote time and energy to learning about art fundamentals such as 3D form, light behavior, and perspective, and also color theory, because you have to be able to readily draw what you have around you, and it can be very intimidating, especially if you don't understand how things around you have volume, mass. They are made up of different planes, and those planes are affected by lights in different ways, which create values on them. If you don't understand perspective, which is directly related to 3D form, then it's going to be very difficult for you to draw something like a building, a house, a car, a setting like the inside of a coffee shop. So that's key. And also another tip is create a little pouch that you can take when you are going to be creating artwork or sketches outdoors. A watercolor set that is smaller, in a tin container or something like that, with a limited amount of colors would be super helpful if you want to do watercolor sketching outdoors. Just making sure that you have that little set of supplies prepared for you that you can easily pop in your bag. That is super, super helpful, because most often than not, you want things to be more portable and practical when you're going to take them off to a trip somewhere or out of your studio. Because, for example, in your studio, you could be using a ceramic mixing palette, and a ceramic mixing palette is not very practical when it comes to taking it outdoors. It can easily break, it's heavy. So prepare a combo of art supplies that you love to use outdoors, and that is practical in those cases. Okay, moving on to the very last question that I'm gonna be answering today, and this one is, do you have any tips for artists wanting to get started on Patreon? Right off the top of my head, a few things that I can tell you are that it is very important that you have some sort of audience already built, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube or wherever it is, but you have to have some sort of audience, because if you don't, then who are you going to be sending to your Patreon page? You have to have some sort of audience, and always remember that if you, let's just say that you have 10,000 followers on Instagram or on YouTube or wherever, just a teeny tiny amount of those 10,000 followers or subscribers are going to even go and visit your Patreon page. And also, having a membership site like that is a lot of work. You have to commit to whatever rewards you set for each of your tiers, because on Patreon you can create different tiers with different benefits, and you have to be very smart and careful about the benefits that you set so that they are something that's realistic for you in your life, that you feel you can fulfill on time, consistently, month to month or week to week, because there are going to be people relying on you and just thinking that you're going to be sharing stuff. And at the same time, the amount of work that you put in is exactly the same whether you have 5 people in your membership or 100 people in your membership. But if you have 100 people on your website, then you have income coming in from your efforts, and it's kind of sustainable, or it's getting sustainable. But if you just have 5 people and you're putting in a ton of effort to fulfill those rewards for each tier, then it's going to be very, very draining, and you're probably are going to have a hard time pushing through. I know a lot of artists who give up because they overcommit to the things that they're going to be sharing on Patreon, and they're growing very, very slowly. And so they cancel their Patreon account and they come back later once their audience has grown a little bit more. So I would say when it comes to Patreon, don't put the cart in front of the horse. Make sure that you've grown your audience enough before you launch a Patreon or even consider launching a Patreon. What I can tell you for myself is that I had a very, very slow growth on Patreon. It has taken me almost 2 years to get to a point at which it is now, of consistent effort and making sure that I'm always fulfilling the things that I promise on time. And I know that I probably launched my Patreon before I had a large enough audience, but I knew for me, I was okay with that slow growth. Why? Because I had income coming in from other streams, and at the same time, I wanted to test the waters. I know that for me, it would have been way too overwhelming to have way too many people coming in right off the bat. I still had a lot of growth to do when it comes to content creation and making sure that I was managing my time correctly and stuff like that. So I was okay with that slow growth. Make sure that when you do get to creating your Patreon page, that you set up your tiers in a very, very smart way. Don't overcommit because you're gonna burn yourself out. And at the same time, really invest time and energy into improving your time management skills. And finally, make sure that you're also learning about marketing your Patreon page. Because if you don't put any time and energy into marketing strategies, then you can have the most amazing Patreon page with the most amazing artwork and the most amazing services / products, and no one is going to come to visit your Patreon if you're not constantly marketing it. All right, you guys, that is gonna do it for today's Q&A video. I am so grateful to every single one of you guys who have subscribed to my channel. I am so happy that I finally reached the 10,000 subscriber mark. It means the world to me. And I am so, so excited about continuing to improve the content that I share and also to continue growing this channel. I hope that you enjoyed this one. I hope that it was helpful. And if you did, make sure to leave me a comment in the comment section below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so that I can see you next week for another video. Thank you so, so much for watching, and have a beautiful rest of the day. Bye, guys.